the way I normally go, I would pass that, the gun range. And again, it just speaks to, like, in a way, our society, we support gun violence. It's like just the contradictions. We criminalize people on the one hand for hurting people, but on the other hand, we have a society where we're promoting, like, the use of guns, and, like, on the tragic end of things, we're incarcerating people, but we're at the same time celebrating people's ability to use guns and the freedom to use guns. So that's another thing I noticed in Newtown on the way to the prison, the way I normally go. So my brother Joshua is incarcerated in Garner Correctional Facility, and it's interesting that Newtown is where the shootings happened years ago, where the children were killed. And what's also interesting on the ride to Garner Correctional is that there is an old psychiatric facility called Fairfield Hills that at one point housed 4,000 people, and it was shut down some years ago and is around the corner from the prison, where we now have more people incarcerated in the state of Connecticut who have psychiatric illnesses than in actual psychiatric hospitals. And although I think that when we deinstitutionalized hospitals, we were actually trying to help, we actually just moved the problem. And the significance of this all is that I believe that we really need to reform our criminal justice system to actually provide care for people with mental health issues and not incarceration. Right now, my brother is in a cell 21 hours out of the day, and although there are some mental health services that he receives there, I don't believe that it's all conducive to really treating his mental illness and helping him recover from the trauma that he actually dealt with as a young boy, that I believe contributed to the situation that he's in now. And there are thousands of people in the state of Connecticut that are in a similar situation to my brother. And we're filming this because I want to be the voice for those people. So on the way to Garner, we're gonna pass a psychiatric hospital called Fairfield Hills, and it is a large building and a very large campus that actually has underground tunnels throughout the facility where they would transport different people who were hospitalized there. It hasn't been used for years. It's still standing right around the corner from the prison, from Garner Correctional, which is a level 4 prison and has some of the most violent offenders in the state of Connecticut. I get a call from my mother saying that my brother keeps thinking that my mother's husband is trying to hurt him. And she's saying that she's calling the crisis center, and a couple hours later she tells me that he's been admitted into Waterbury Hospital. And I go to visit him, and I learned that after doing some tests that they have diagnosed him with schizophrenia. And in that moment, I had to be a strong sister for my brother. And I can remember going to visit him in the hospital and seeing him look dazed and just telling him that this is all going to be all right. Like, this is all going to be a part of your story and your testimony. And so he was in Waterbury Hospital for several weeks. And after he was there, they actually transferred him to a respite facility, which is a step down from the hospital. And I visited him there, and he just did so great. He was taking his medication. And then from there, they were able to find him a place in a group home in Waterbury. And I can remember visiting him and seeing that he was doing well. And before I knew it, he had learned of a job through one of his friends, and he started working at this factory full time. And then he got his own apartment on Robin Street in Waterbury. And through it all, I was just so proud of him that he actually the way he was handling it, like how resilient that he was to be diagnosed with schizophrenia, and now to have created this pathway of self-sufficiency. And a couple years, maybe I would say like 2 years into him being in his apartment, like he also decided that he was going to go to college and pick up a trade. And I would always talk to him about how good of a business person that he was, and he wanted to do marketing, and I wanted to pull him into some of my businesses for music artists. And he was on probation at one point, and nearing the end of his probation last year in 2017, and all of a sudden I get a call that he had a fight, and that he thought some guys were calling him racial slurs, and they jumped him. And I went to the hospital to see him, just grateful that it wasn't worse, that he just had to have stitches on his lips and it wasn't worse. And then a month later, I'm texting him every day to see how he's doing. And I decided at some point to really get involved to support him and to advocate for him, because I love him and I want to see him stay stable. And so this 1 week comes, and I'm like texting him every day, how are you doing? When's your next appointment? How are you feeling? And like I made it a point to start checking in with him, because I wanted to make sure he was good and that no other fights happened. And he's like, I'm anxious. And I'm like, okay, well, did you call your nurse? Did you call your providers? And he's like, no, I haven't called them, but I will call them. And then I follow up with him the next day, and he still hasn't called. And then Thursday comes, and he's like, I can't reach anybody. Can you call for me? And 2 minutes later, he tells me he made an appointment for Friday. Friday comes, the appointment doesn't happen. And on Saturday is my grandfather's birthday party, and like we go to his house to pick my brother up, and he's like, I'm not gonna come. I'm like, I'm too tired. I'm not coming. And later, so we all go to the party, and the next day about 12 midnight, I get a text from my mother saying that I got a call from Joshua that he's in jail. And I look at my phone and I think like, okay, well, maybe this is like what he needs. Maybe this is gonna like stop the issues he's having. That was the thought that came to my mind, and I had no clue what happened in that moment. And then the next day, my mother goes to court to meet him and find out what happened, and she calls me and she tells me, he stabbed someone. He's getting charged with stabbing someone. And I, in that moment, just dropped to my knees, and I start crying that something like this could actually happen to my brother. And after picking myself off the floor and just talking to my mother about the details, I just said, I remember my mother saying to me, like, you did everything you could. So my brother Joshua is incarcerated in Garner, which is around the corner from where we are at Fairfield Hills. He's 27 years old, and he's been there for almost a year prior to even having a trial. And he is in a cell 21 hours out of the day. He has an hour for recreation twice a day. He has counseling once a week, but nowhere near the amount of mental health treatment that he needs that could actually help him to be stable. And
how much does he need, and what's the issues that he's facing?
So his bond. You want to know how much his bond is?
No, like
okay.
what kind of mental health treatment does he need, and what is he getting?
Yeah, so Joshua has schizophrenia, and he's on medications. He takes his medications, but I believe like more innovative therapies, talk therapy, group therapy, participation in that, ability to come out of his cell more. And actually, it's not just the treatment aspect, because treatment is simple. He's taking his medication. He's compliant with that. But part of what I don't agree with how the correctional system is set up is that there is no structure for him to actually do something right now with his life, so that when he does come out, that he has a future that he can create for himself, whether it was job development or to actually heal from his traumas. Seeing a counselor for once a week, although that's helpful and although I'm grateful he's there, I don't think that it is ultimately going to help him heal and come out as someone who's able to function more powerfully with his schizophrenia.
Is the reason that he doesn't have any help with setting himself up powerfully for after prison, is that because of his mental health issues?
No, it's just the structure. It's just the structure of the prison system. The Department of Corrections, I can't speak for every prison, but I know that the one that he's in, because of his mental health issues, he's on a certain floor, he's on the D block, and they have limitations regarding what activities they could participate in. So I think part of it is based on the level he's in. He's level 4, so that's like one step away from being the highest security level. But I think that although I understand the reason that they have those safety measures in place, I think that there's other types of evaluations that they should be doing along the way so that people can that they can transition and that they can go to lower level prisons as long as they're demonstrating that they're stable and that they're safe, and they can have access to some of the other resources that are there. Because looking at Garner's website, they have groups, they have lots of theater groups and just different types of group, anger management, but because of like the level prisoner that he is, he doesn't get to participate in things like that.
Why is he a level 4 prisoner?
So that has to do with the nature of his charge. So my brother is being charged with assault 1, which is basically assault with a deadly weapon. And so they determine your security level based on what your charge is. It doesn't matter if you're guilty or not. They base it on the charge.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so what transpired when he was either arrested or charged with that charge?
Well, what transpired the first week that my brother was incarcerated, he actually was in Waterbury, a prison in Waterbury, and then he was transferred to a New Haven facility, and he was hospitalized while he was in the New Haven facility. And I believe that's just because of his mental illness, because he has schizophrenia. I think that was a protocol just put in place to make sure he was not like a danger to himself or others. But from there, they ultimately transferred him to Garner Correctional, which actually has a floor that is dedicated to treating people with mental health issues. I'm told that they may not have had like the medication that he's on to really be able to maintain him in that setting. So I am grateful of all the places that he could be, that he is in Garner, and I think that there could be improvements made in the setting and how they treat people with mental illness. With it, our very own Josh, when he witnessed my mom go through the abuse and he blamed himself, and it's like, when you suppress stuff like that you go through, it comes out sideways. So he could have been always like prone to schizophrenia, but maybe if he had another way to cope with that trauma, it wouldn't have came out. But I'm suggesting just from my knowledge and my social work knowledge and all my study, it was triggered. It was probably triggered by his environment, Like it's historically was in my mother's side of the family, because Uncle Kenny had schizophrenia, right? So the gene was there, but science shows that it is environment that triggers that, right? So I think as a man in society, like, there's so many messages saying, like, you have to be the protector, you have to do that, you have to do this. And when he told me, I'm not making up these conversations, he said to me, like, when that happened, like, I blamed myself. Now, that wasn't his fault. It wasn't his job as an 11-year-old boy to protect my mother from getting abused, or, when she left her boyfriend at the time, he hid in the closet and he jumped out the closet and started hitting her with a liquor bottle. And Josh blamed himself because he said, oh, I introduced them. You know what I mean? And I don't think he ever forgave himself for that. Not that it was his fault, but like whatever he had about it, he never really like let that go. And so how much of that has to do with, how much he acted out? You know what I mean? I know Joshua is not an angel, but the messages you get, I think as a man in society, is you got to be that way. You have to protect your family. Like, so I think there's so many similar stories. I try to go to court every time Joshua has a court case, and like the stuff I hear, I will never forget. I was there when somebody was getting sentenced. They got sentenced to probably like 18 years. They murdered like a delivery woman in Waterbury, and it was by mistake. They said that they didn't intend for the gun to go off. It went off, and she died. But the point is, the guy got up there and he started sharing, I was like sold into slavery as a little boy. I didn't grow up without my parents, and like that night I was out specifically to get money to get diapers and formula for my baby. And it's like, I'm not making it up. It's like so many people in prison have dealt with something traumatic and they went left field because of